On Veterans Day in Harlan County, Kentucky, a man who once held a firing line together for 11 hours is sitting alone at a table set for 4 people. The food is hot. The candles are lit. The chairs are empty, and in 20 minutes, a young man who almost didn't take this delivery route today is going to knock on that door and spend the next 3 hours learning something no classroom, no recruiter, and no motivational video ever taught him about what it actually costs a person to come home from a war. But here's the thing nobody in Harlan County knows yet. The reason those chairs are empty has nothing to do with the people who didn't show up. It has everything to do with the 4 men who never got the chance to come home at all. Harlan County, Kentucky sits deep in the eastern coalfields, where the mountains fold so tight around the hollows that the sun gets to some roads for only a few hours a day. There's a veterans post on the edge of town with a flagpole out front, a diner that's been open since 1962, and roads that twist up into the hills where the addresses get harder to find. The further you go, Leo Vasquez is 23 years old and 3 weeks into a new delivery job he took because the warehouse work dried up and his grandfather's medical bills don't pause for the economy. He's got his grandfather's old truck, a phone mount that keeps slipping off the dash, and a route today that runs deep into the hill roads nobody fights over, because the driveways are steep and the packages are heavy and the GPS loses signal at the worst possible moments. He almost traded this route with a coworker this morning. He's glad now that he didn't, though it'll take him a few more hours to understand why. Leo's grandfather, Abulo Manny, as the whole family calls him, spent 3 years in the Marines in the early 70s, and has never once in Leo's memory talked about it with anything but a tight jaw and a subject change. Leo grew up understanding, without being told, that there are things men carry home from wars that don't belong on a dinner table, and you don't push. You just learn to recognize the look and leave space around it. The address at the top of the hill is a small white frame house with a covered porch, a flag hung straight and careful from a bracket beside the door, and a mailbox with the name Calhoun painted on it in faded black letters. Leo parks at the bottom of the driveway, hoists the box onto his shoulder, and starts up through the front window. Just visible from the path, he can see a table set for 4, candles burning low, and a man sitting at the head of it, alone, not eating, just sitting with his hands flat on the table on either side of an untouched plate. Leo rings the bell, waits, rings again. The man who opens the door is 57 years old and built like someone who used to be bigger and didn't lose the frame when the weight came off. His name is Garrett Calhoun. He's got close-cropped gray hair, a jaw that doesn't give much away, and eyes the particular shade of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. He's wearing a pressed shirt dressed up. Leo realizes, for something, and on his left hand, no wedding ring, but a thin scar across the knuckles that runs the length of all 4 fingers and disappeared into his cuff. Package for Calhoun. Leo says, "That's me," Garrett says, and reaches for it, and then pauses because Leo hasn't moved yet. Leo is looking past him at the table for plates, 4 glasses, 4 chairs, 1 man. "Sorry," Leo says quickly, pulling his eyes back. "Sorry, I didn't mean to stare." Garrett looks back at the table himself, like he's reminding himself what it looks like from the outside. "It's all right," Garrett says. "I know how it looks." Leo should leave. He's got 11 more stops before dark, and the GPS already lost signal twice on the way up this road. He doesn't leave. "I'm sorry to ask," Leo says. And you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business. But is everything okay, sir? Garrett looks at him a long moment, measuring something. You got somewhere to be in the next hour? Garrett asks, 11 more stops. Leo says honestly, could you be 11 stops short and still get home tonight? Leo thinks about his grandfather's medical bills. He thinks about his coworker who almost took this route instead. He thinks about the way the man at that table looked, sitting with his hands flat on either side of a plate he hadn't touched. Yeah, Leo says. I could manage that. Garrett opens the door wider. Come in, then, he says. I've got more food than one person was ever going to eat if your family has somebody who came home from a war and never quite talked about it, a grandfather. An uncle, a father. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We always want to know where these stories find you. Inside, the house is clean and carefully kept, the kind of clean that comes from a man who lives alone and has decided order is one of the things he can still control. Military efficiency. Leo recognizes it without being able to name it. Because he's seen it in his grandfather's garage. Everything in its place. Nothing wasted, nothing left out that doesn't serve a purpose except the table. The table is set with a care that goes beyond efficiency. Cloth napkins folded into points. Candles in glass holders burned down an inch. A bowl of rolls still warm from the oven for places. 4 settings. 1 occupant. Leo sits where Garrett gestures the chair second from the left, beside an empty seat, and accepts the plate Garrett passes him without asking. The food is real and careful. Roast chicken, potatoes in a cast iron pan, green beans cooked long and soft the way Leo's grandmother used to do them back home. Someone made this with time and intention. You cooked all this yourself? Leo asks. Since 6 this morning, Garrett says, sitting back down at the head of the table. Were people supposed to come? Garrett picks up his fork, sets it back down. No, he says. Nobody was supposed to come. Leo looks at the 4 place settings and back at the man across from him. Then who are the other 3 plates for? Garrett is quiet for a long moment. Looking at the table the way you look at something you've looked at 1,000 times and still haven't quite gotten used to. Every Veterans Day, he says slowly, I set a table for 4. I cook a full meal. I sit with them. With who? With the 3 men from my unit who didn't make it home, Garrett says. Danny Rourke. Specialist Isaiah Webb. Private First Class Carlos Aguirre. He says the names the way someone says names they've said alone. In private, many times quiet, practiced, careful. I've done it every November 11th since 2006. 18 years. Leo doesn't say anything. He's learned from his grandfather that some silences aren't gaps, they're invitations. He just picks up his fork and eats and waits, and after a moment, Garrett starts talking in a way Leo suspects he hasn't talked to another person in a very long time. The 4 of us were tight, Garrett says. The way you get tight with people when the stakes are real. Danny was from Tennessee. Isaiah was from Baltimore. Carlos was from El Paso, and he had 3 sisters who he talked about constantly. And he could cook anything out of nothing, which mattered more than people realize when you're a long way from anywhere with food worth eating. He looks at Carlos's plate. Carlos taught me this recipe. Garrett says, the chicken. Taught me his mother's way back in 2004 during a quiet stretch between operations. Said he was going to open a restaurant when he got home. Sighed I could be his first investor if I wanted in on something guaranteed to make money. Leo watches Garrett's face as he talks. There's something moving behind it, something that's been sitting still for a long time and is deciding slowly whether to come forward. What happened to them? Leo asks, quiet. I'd, Garrett says. 3 of them in the vehicle ahead of mine. I was 20 meters back when it went off. His hands are flat on the table again, the same way they were when Leo first saw him through the window. 20 meters is close enough to feel the pressure wave and far enough to walk away from it. I've spent 18 years not knowing what to do with that math. Leo sets his fork down. My grandfather was in the Marines, he says. Vietnam era. He never talks about it. Not once in 23 years of me trying to understand who he was. Before he was just Abuelo. Garrett looks at him. What do you know about what he did over there? Nothing, Leo says. I know he came home. I know he never threw anything away that was issued to him. I know he keeps a photograph face down in the top drawer of his dresser, and I've never once seen him look at it. He pauses. I used to think that meant he wanted to forget. I'm starting to think that's not what face down means at all. Garrett nods slowly. It means he remembers, he says. Face down doesn't mean forgotten. It means too present to look it directly. Leo sits with that for a moment. Do you think he has something like this? Leo asks, nodding at the table. Something he does. Some private way he carries it. I'd bet everything I own on it, Garrett says. Men who came home with that kind of weight almost always find some way to keep the count, whether anybody else ever knows about it or not. They eat for a while in a silence that's companionable rather than empty. The candles burning lower, the food going warm and then cool. The way meals do when the conversation matters more than the temperature dot. Then Leo notices something he missed when he first sat down. The 4th place setting, the one across from Garrett, directly at the other end of the table, is different from the other 2 empty ones. The napkin is folded differently. The glass has something in it that isn't water, something dark, a small pour of something amber. And beside the plate, just visible under the edge of the cloth napkin, there's a small object. Leo squints. A wristwatch, old, military issue, the kind with a scratched crystal and a canvas strap gone stiff with age. Whose is that? Leo asks, nodding toward it. Garrett looks at the watch for a moment before answering. Danny's, he says. It came back in his personal effects. His family sent it to me a year after he died. Said he'd have wanted me to have it, because apparently Danny told his mother about me, which I didn't know until I got a letter from a woman in Tennessee I'd never met, telling me her son trusted me more than anyone he'd served with. He reaches over and straightens the watch slightly, adjusting something that didn't need adjusting. I've never worn it, Garrett says. Never felt right to. But I can't put it away either. So it eats dinner with us. Leo leaves 2 hours later, well after dark. 11 deliveries lighter on his manifest, and one thing heavier that he doesn't have a name for yet. He drives down the hill road with the windows cracked, cold November air coming in. And at the bottom of the mountain, he pulls over in the gravel lot of a closed bait shop and sits for a while with the engine running. He thinks about his grandfather's face-down photograph. He thinks about a kitchen in El Paso where a young soldier learned to cook chicken the right way and never got to open his restaurant. He thinks about a wristwatch that eats dinner every November 11th because the man wearing it can't wear it and can't put it away. Then Leo picks up his phone and calls his grandfather. It's past 9. Abuelo Manny answers on the second ring because he doesn't sleep as much as he used to. Mio, his grandfather says. Everything okay? Yeah, Leo says. Yeah, I'm okay. I wanted to ask you something. And you can tell me. It's none of my business. A pause. Ask. The photograph in your drawer. The one face down. Who is it? A longer pause. Long enough that Leo thinks he's gone too far, pushed past the invisible line he's always known not to cross. Then his grandfather says quietly, his name was Raymond. Raymond Estrada. He was from Tucson. He liked baseball and he was a terrible card player, and he died in 1971. And I've never once said his name out loud to anybody in this family, because I never figured out how to say it without everything else coming with it. Leo sits in the gravel lot for another minute. Engine running, eyes stinging. "Okay," Leo says. "Okay, abuelo. Thank you. Why are you asking tonight?" "I met somebody," Leo says, "who sets a table every Veterans Day for the men he served with who didn't come home. And I think you might understand what that means better than I do." Another silence. Then rough and quiet. "Tell me about him." It takes Leo the better part of a year to put it together, mostly with help from his grandfather, who turns out, once the first conversation broke the seal, to have considerably more to say than 40 years of silence suggested. The following November, on Veterans Day, Leo drives back up the hill road to Harlan County Dot in the truck with him. His grandfather, Abuelo Manny, 71 years old, quiet the whole drive in the way of a man preparing himself for something he's made his peace with. Garrett opens the door before they even knock. He set the table the same way he always has: 4 places, cloth napkins, candles. The watch beside Danny's plate. He's also added 2 more settings without being asked. "I hoped you'd bring somebody," Garrett says simply. He looks at Leo's grandfather. "Sir." Abuelo Manny looks at the table. He looks at the watch beside the 4th plate. Then he reaches into the pocket of his jacket and sets something carefully beside the chair Leo's sitting in. A small, folded photograph, edges soft with age. Right side up for the first time in 50 years. "Raymond Estrada," he says, to no one in particular, or maybe to all of them. "Tucson, terrible card player." They sit down. 6 chairs. 3 present. 3 absent. 1 table dot, and for the first time in 18 years. Garrett Calhoun does not eat that meal alone. Here is what Leo Vasquez carries with him now. On every route, past every porch, every flagpole, every face-down photograph he'll never see inside a stranger's drawer. The men who carry the heaviest weight home from a war almost never set it down. But sometimes, when the right person knocks at the right door at the right moment, they'll let somebody sit with them while they hold it. Garrett Calhoun spent 18 years believing that the most respectful thing he could do for Danny, Isaiah, and Carlos was to carry them quietly, alone, without asking anyone else to share the weight. He wasn't wrong exactly, but he was lonelier than he had to be, and loneliness, sustained long enough, starts to feel like the only honest way to honor something, when really, it's just the fear that nobody else will understand what you're carrying well enough to treat it right. Leo understood, not because he'd served, because he grew up with a man who had, and learned, without being told, how to recognize what care looks like when it's been kept silent for a very long time. Garrett Calhoun still sets the table every Veterans Day. He always will, but the table is bigger now. 6 chairs, some years 7, depending on who makes the drive up that hill road in November. Leo comes every year. Abuelo Manny came 3 years running before his health made the drive too hard, and now he calls instead. And Garrett puts the phone in the middle of the table on speaker, so he's there in the way that counts. The photograph of Raymond Estrada sits right side up on Abuelo Manny's dresser now. Has since that November. Leo noticed it the next time he visited and didn't say anything about it, because some things don't need to be said out loud to matter. If you have a veteran in your family, a grandfather, a father, an uncle, a neighbor who carries something quietly that you've never quite known how to ask about. We hope tonight's story is a gentle reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply knock on the door and sit down at the table. Don't have to understand what they're carrying to make sure they're not carrying it. Alone. We believe the names we're afraid to say. Out loud are exactly the ones that most need to be spoken. In whatever quiet and careful way. We can manage Dot. Does your family have a veteran who kept something private for years? And did you ever find out what it was? We'd love to hear about it in the comments below, Dot, if tonight's story moved you. We'd be so grateful if you'd like and subscribe. It helps stories like this one find the people who need them most. Dot, thank you for spending this evening with us. We'll see you in the next story.